It's time. It's time to stop being accountable. It's time to stop being accountable. What does accountable mean to you? When I hear the word, I'm thinking pressure. I'm thinking a task assigned. I'm thinking bare minimum. When you hear the word accountability, what do you hear when you hear that? That's what I want to speak with you all today about. No longer are we going to be accountable. It's time to take ownership. That is what we need. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the KimUnity Solutions Podcast, the only podcast that's inspiring humanity and leadership within and beyond the workplace. It is so good to be with you all for another week. I hope you all are off to an amazing start. I am your host, Kim the SME. As always, I am only speaking from my experiences. Let's get into it. There's accountability and then there's ownership. And like I said, when I hear the word accountability, this is something that caught my attention because that's a word that's being thrown out there lately. Be accountable, take action, be responsible, get in group calls, get in accountability calls. And I get it. I understand it. That is great. That is great. I'm on accountability calls as well. But what I realized is that there's a difference between being accountable and taking ownership. And that's something that I've always displayed in the workplace. And you can see the ones who actually display the ownership aspect and mindset over the accountable, because the people who are only performing to be accountable are only checking off that list. There is no going above and beyond. There is no checks and balances. There is no verification. There is no innovation. It is just completing the task. And that's what we need to move away from. And I feel as far as leadership goes, if leadership was to speak to their teams with a different type of expectation, no longer is it you're accountable, as in they're micromanaging or pointing the finger. It is, okay, who is going to take ownership of this? As in, it's yours. It's yours. Just like renting versus owning. My daughter had a car accident not too long ago in my car, and I had to get a rental. And I'm the type of person that I treat everyone's stuff as I treat my own. But I do recall being in a parking lot and not paying attention to how big a speed bump was and went over it, at a much faster pace than I would have in my own car. It wasn't intentional. I may have made the same mistake in my own car. But after I did it, I said, ooh, I wouldn't have done this in my car. And that's not something that I do on a regular. That's not something that was intentional. But I noticed that I was in someone else's car. But if I'm borrowing something from you, I treat it the same way I would treat my own, because I want my stuff returned back the same way that I lent it out. And I try to raise my children the same way. When you borrow somebody's anything, you always bring it back in the same condition or even better. If you're borrowing someone's car, my dad always told me, if you borrow somebody else's car, if they gave it to you on half, you bring it back on full, because you never know when you have to borrow that car again. You always treat someone else's car or someone else's items as you would treat your own, and hopefully you're responsible with your own things. I had this thought, these words came into my mind, and I said, I really believe that ownership is what we need in the workplace and what we need in our households, in our community. treating people as if we would treat our own. And what I did was I went ahead and looked up the definitions because I always want to start with a baseline. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defined accountability as an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's own actions. And that word obligated is an obligation or a willingness. This is something that there's pressure on that. The pressure is external, it's coming from someone else. There's rules and regulations that are not my own that are being told to me that I need to do. That's a different kind of feeling than it's my own. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree with that, I should ask? Do you agree with that? Now, if it's ownership, you understand it from the beginning to the end. You know that your name is on it. And I take my name very seriously. When it goes out, when my work goes out, when anything of mine goes out and it's known that it belongs to me, I want it to be right. I want it to be pristine. I want it to be a reflection of who I am. And that is what taking ownership is. You're going to go that extra mile. You're going to stay later, or you may come in earlier, or you'll be more detail oriented. You'll make more phone calls to make sure that your data is correct. You'll be doing more research on the side to make sure that, you're dotting all I's and crossing all T's. Again, accountability is saying an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility. When you own something, you already know it's your responsibility. You have already accepted it. Ownership, the state, relation, or fact of being an owner, a legal right of possession. And then it says, used to express immediate or direct kinship, doing something without the help of another person. To an extent, I agree with that, because you can have ownership and still need help with something. But that's something that you're initiating most of the time. There is a difference between being accountable and taking ownership. There's an energy shift. One is of obligation and the other is empowerment. It's something that you are striving for yourself. You're striving for ownership. You put more into it from the inside out. It's not someone that is over your shoulder telling you what you are responsible for. And I feel that's something that we're lacking in some of our workplaces. Are you taking ownership? Even in our families, are you taking ownership? Are you doing the bare minimum? It's like your teenager saying, "Mom, I cleaned up my room." That's great because they already know they're supposed to clean their room. You're on them all the time about picking their clothes up, washing their clothes, vacuuming, making sure their bed is made. That's taking responsibility. Ownership, I would say, is more about, yes, my room is clean. I also did the dishes. I also vacuumed downstairs, not just my space that I'm in, but I am understanding that this is my home, not just my room. And so, I don't care that you didn't eat dinner. You live here and there's dishes. Or I need you to do anything, take out the trash. If it's something that has to be told to you, that is more of an accountability. Chores. By this time, I expect you to do this. On this day, I expect you to do this. Ownership is someone who is sitting back saying, okay, I need to do this. They are making their own plans to get it done and to get it done right. As I was researching this and really thinking about it, I started making a list of what accountability is and what ownership is. Accountability is more about being assigned something, where ownership is more about being proactive. Let me get ahead of it. Let me make sure all bases are covered. Ownership is more of an investment, knowing that this depends on me. This is my investment. This is what I want to see grow. It's not just a checklist like being accountable is. It's not just meeting a deadline. What about past that? What about beyond that? Ownership is about beyond. Those in leadership roles, if you approached your team in a different way, sometimes we have to change our approach. You may be so used to dictating and giving orders, you're not really allowing your team to voice what their concerns are and how they work best and what they need in order to, get the job done as expected or go above and beyond. When you start allowing that feedback and having true conversations and communication, a two-way communication, when you start getting a 360 loop, when you start allowing for feedback and getting understanding from your team, and you are allowing them to be innovative, when you're allowing them to be open and to be honest and to share their ideas, that is how ownership starts taking root. But if it's only a do as I say, or being closed-minded to different ideas and different ways of being innovative, then it becomes an accountability role. And you receive less. There's less output from that kind of behavior. Another difference between being accountable and taking ownership is one is an internal motivator. You're motivated from the inside. When the other, again, is an obligation. Where in your life, when you think back, when you're listening to what I'm saying, what comes to mind? What scenario comes to mind? What has happened at work or at home or in your communities where, okay, I'm only being accountable in this area where I can improve? It's all about self-awareness, self-correction. We don't always have to wait for someone else to tell us we're doing something wrong or we can improve in this area. Where do you believe you can improve? Where is it that you can take ownership? It could be in your marriage. It could be in your parental role. Yes, okay, you're responsible for giving your child 3 meals a day. That's being accountable. Picking your child up at 3:45, 4:45. That's being accountable. But how are you taking ownership? What are you instilling in that child? What kind of values are you bringing up in them? What are your expectations? How are you telling them to speak to themselves? What are you pouring into them? Are you being open? Are you listening to their concerns? Are you listening to their dreams, or are you telling them what they're going to major in? Are you telling them, what you expect? At some point, yes, there are expectations. There's definitely expectations. I'm saying all this to say that being accountable is the bare minimum. At what point are you going to elevate? At what point are you going to level up? At what point are you going to claim it? I mentioned earlier that I am on accountability calls that I'm on every morning. I'm not saying at all that accountability is a bad thing, but I'm saying there is better. There is better. But I enjoy my accountability call because there's 3 of us and we are holding each other accountable. It's like it is an external motivator. And it's also good because you get to hear other people's perspective on something. I can throw out an idea and then have other people be like, oh, I know a better way of doing that. Are you open to this? Or I can say, hey, I just completed this, or I need to make this phone call. And someone can say, you should have that automated. It's real simple to just do this, this, and this. That's what I use my accountability calls for. It's insufficient for us to be dependent on external motivation. We can't depend on someone else to pour in us for us to get done what we want to get done. What if they don't feel like pushing you? What if they're struggling pushing themselves? They have other things on their plate to do. But it is a great thing to have a meeting of the minds. To say, okay, I did this. I said I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and I completed it. That's the bare minimum. Taking ownership of the good and the bad, that is the goal. Making sure that all inputs have been received. Making sure that all steps are being taken and completed in order to make that optimal goal. There is a difference between being accountable and taking ownership. And I want everyone who is listening to the sound of my voice to truly think about what in your lives can you take to that next level? What is it that you already take ownership of? And how is that going for you? What can you bring up to that level? No one is perfect. There's always room for improvement. And I want you to start thinking about how can you get to that next level? What area are you slacking in? What area are you not slacking in? You're meeting the goal, the quota, but how can you elevate it to where you're not being told what to do? Or having to be asked if you can stay late to do it? Or has it been done yet? Even if you have a manager who acts or who has the expectations of accountability, you can train them into understanding that you're not them. You take ownership. And I'm just now realizing that was the difference between me and some of my coworkers when I was in the workplace that I'm thinking of right now. I couldn't figure out what the difference was. But I'm always looking at how I do things, why I do things. I'm very self-aware, but I didn't have the verbiage for it. But yes, I took ownership. I wanted to understand where processes were broken. I wanted to understand why certain challenges kept coming up every single month. Why is that? Let me dig to get to the root of that. How can this be prevented? See, that's what taking ownership is. It's not just about rectifying something at that moment. It's about, okay, why did this even occur? What steps can be taken so that it's prevented for the future? Is there a way to improve this overall? How can I help another department or my team with this project? How can I improve this project so much that it takes less time to do so I can focus on other tasks? That is what ownership is. Accountability is about being pushed to do something. Ownership is about being driven to do something. Let's stop being accountable and let's start taking ownership. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I am your host, Kim the SME. As always, I am only speaking from my experiences. I hope you take something from this. I hope you think about it. I hope you apply it to your life, your job, your family, and continue to elevate. You all be blessed. Until next time, you have been listening to the KimUnity Solutions podcast. Bye-bye.